we will be taking a look at observations, which are another method of data collection. So observations are basically when you collect data by watching your participants in simple terms. And by watching them, you record their behaviors, whatever your intended data collection is. So you can either use observation on its own as a separate method of data collection, or you can just use observations in an entire study. So sometimes we observe participants in experiments. So there was an observation conducted in the Bandura core study of aggression, where we observed the children's behaviors after they had been exposed to aggressive or subdued models. There are actually 8 types of observations. These aren't typically types, these are simply the characteristics of observations, and they can be used together. So there are 4 categories. The first category is the nature. So observations can either be covert, which means hidden. So the researcher, the observer, is hidden from the participants, so they don't know that they're being watched. And typically the observer would have to hide themselves so they aren't caught. And overt is the exact opposite. So in this case, the participants know the role of the observer. They know that they are being watched, and there is no need of the experiment disguising themselves. Then we come to the role of the observer. So there can be 2 roles that the observer can take. It can either be participant observation, in which the observer tries to blend into the group of the participants or social situation. So for example, if we are observing in a classroom of students, then the observer will disguise or just place themselves in the same setting and be acting like a student. And it can either be covert or overt. So you can see how these characteristics can work in tandem in any observation. And then there is non-participant observations, where the observer does not make any efforts to be part of the social setting, and they simply observe from a distance. So then there is the setting. And in the naturalistic observation, the setting is that in which participants can be normally found. So this is a setting in which participants would be observed without any sort of alteration or editing in the setting. In a controlled observation, on the other hand, we would be observing the participants in a situation or environment that has either been physiologically, as in physically, or socially manipulated. So we have placed some sort of stooge or confederate in the situation, such as we did in the Schachter and Singer observation, where we had a stooge in both the angry condition and the euphoric condition. Then we come to the method of data collection. So there can be 2 ways in which we collect data. So one can be a structured observation, in which we collect or we record the participants' behaviors in a sort of checklist. So it's a behavioral checklist in which there is a list of behaviors that we have predetermined. And there can be 2 ways that this checklist is formed. It can either be time sampling, so you will have short time intervals of, for example, 30 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so on and so forth. And you will record participant behaviors. You will record the predetermined participant behaviors in each. So you will put a tick mark if after 2 minutes the participant is doing the same thing, and so on. And the second is event sampling, where you just keep on checking or keep on ticking how many times the participant repeats a particular predetermined behavior. So you sort of tally it down. And in unstructured observation, we simply record everything that the participant is doing. So we record all the behaviors. We haven't had a predetermined list of what behaviors to look for. We might have a keen suggestion, but we basically record everything that they do. And there are a few drawbacks to this type of observation, because if we record everything, then we might have a lot of useless data and it can be difficult to sift through. And also, we usually conduct this type of observation as a pilot observation, so We conduct this observation to figure out what sort of behaviors are common or what sort of behaviors we should look for in our participants. So using this type of observation, we then create a behavioral checklist. Now, for example, if we observe participants in this office setting without any manipulation, it would be a naturalistic observation. And if we use this is a one-way mirror, it is often seen in investigation rooms or police stations. So on the outside of it, the observer can see into the room, but in the inside, whoever is sitting in that room, they will only see a mirror. They will not be able to see outside of the room. So if we are observing the participants using this sort of device, then it will be a covert or a hidden observation. And if, for example, the observer is standing off to the side, holding a clipboard in their hands and recording the behaviors, then that will be a non-participant observation because they have taken no measures to be part of the social setting and they are instead standing off at a distance and recording the behaviors of their participants. And another important thing to note is that whenever we have animal participants, we we are conducting a structured observation, the behavioral checklist is known as an ethogram. So whenever we're conducting a structured observation, we use an ethogram to record predetermined behaviors of animals. Next, we will be looking at the elephant in the room, correlations. So what are correlations? So a correlational study is essentially you trying to determine a non-causal relationship between two measured variables. So think of it as two dependent variables. So we have two DVs. So we often use correlational studies when we don't have much data to go off on, or if manipulation of variables. So for example, if we conduct any sort of experiment, that would be unethical. So instead, we just measure the trends into variables. So there are so if it correlation is positive, that means the two variables have an increasing relationship between them. So if one increases, so does the other, and if one decreases, so does the other. And negative correlation, both variables have an inverse relationship, and it's very important to have quantitative or numerical measure of data to establish correlational studies. So both of your measured variables should be measured quantitatively in order to be able to plot a graph and to establish a correlation. So correlational research often requires other methods of gathering data. So for example, if you need to gather data to establish a correlation, you can use self-report, so you can use an interview, or you can give them a bunch of rating scale questions on a questionnaire, or you can conduct an observation, a structured observation obviously, and then you can record the behaviors and pit them against whatever other variable you have. So we use a scattered graph or a scatter diagram, which we saw in our previous video, to represent the findings of any correlational study. They do not establish causal relationships, unlike an experiment which establishes a causal relationship, so we are hopefully certain that the IV causes the change in the DV. Here there is no manipulation, so there is no causal relationship. We simply see two hopefully related trends. And if we establish a positive or a negative correlation, it often gives us a base or background, something to go off of, so we can conduct an experiment or future research on the same topic. Upward trends are positive, downward trends are negative, and if there is no trend, then there is no correlation. So this is an example of an upward trend or a positive correlation. This is what we call the line of best fit, and these points are our data points that we have one variable against the y-axis and one against the x-axis. This is the example of a negative correlation, so this is the line of best fit that is drawn inversely, and you can see how we have drawn the line in such a way that most of the points on our graph fall along or near to this line. This is an example of where we have no correlation. So you can see there is no line that can be drawn along which most of the points width would fall. That is it for observations and correlation.